Welcome back to the channel, you guys. Another beautiful day. I don't know if you can see the storm. It's been just nasty, and we're riding back into it. It was really something special to get here. And I'm hoping that it's still something special for you guys when I head back through it. I wasn't in the mood to film on the ride out. I like to give myself a few hours of just enjoying the bike and getting it out of my system. Because talking, I've noticed that sometimes, sorry, I've got a bunch of stuff on my wrist that gets in the way. Sometimes when I talk, I'll notice after 20 minutes of talking or whatever, when I'm finally done, that I missed the whole ride. So, okay. So here we go. I got Zero Cool with me on this amazing road. It's really been just a great day. And I was really glad to have my rain gear on because it was dumping and visibility was down. I mean, I'm telling you, it was nice. I hope it's still there and it didn't blow through. Down the road, I was in cruise control going maybe 80, not necessarily speeding, but definitely, by the law speeding. And we blasted past the sheriff, and I was telling Zero Cool on the Cardo Pack Talks, I was like, oh shit, I hope he doesn't get us, because I think it's a 65 road. And Zero Cool was like, do sheriffs even radar and pull people? Which was a valid point, because in some regions, the sheriff is who travels inmates from like one jail to the next, and in the federal system, I think the sheriffs are more like the taxi drivers. But no, out here they definitely will pull your ass. So dodge the bullet. Also, I don't think 80 on this road is considered speeding as much as it's respectable speed out here. I think if you get pulled over, you're probably going over that. Brother. look at his childhood pictures, and he was such a trippy with these sweaters, and he just was styling. And he had a really good childhood. And from what it looks like on the outside looking in, right, me growing up homeless in the ghetto, I'm like, man, traveled the world, always had the nicest clothes on. Just a dream. And that's just my judgment. Could be wrong. He could have been miserable, but it seemed good. But then he ends up spending almost half his life in prison because he couldn't think. He thought outside the lines, and I can see how he does now. And so he's handling that regret with grace, whereas my dad is just punishing himself, which I think is the most heartbreaking part. So, where in your life can you just take a step back and talk to yourself with grace? Where do you feel like you're falling short with the expectations of others? And if you don't feel like you have that, where do you feel like you fall short with expectations for yourself? And where do you have regrets? Where can you let it all go? And just say, I honor myself for the version of myself that I am now, and for the version of myself that I was back then, and for the different levels of growth I've been able to accomplish, and for how much more growth I still have in me, because it's such a beautiful thing. I've told you guys the stories of me being on drugs, fist fighting, sleeping with random women, not being very connected, robbing people. It took me a lot to get where I'm at. People out there that are in survival mode, it's really easy to write off what you do when you're in survival mode. Like, thou shalt not steal, but I will to eat. That's a DMX line that resonated with me back in the day, and I still live by it. Like, no, I don't steal now. I got food to eat and I'm fine, but I also know that when somebody's back is against the wall, they're gonna make decisions, and it's hard to judge them on that unless you've had your back against the wall too. You won't understand it. I guess that's it. I just wanted to talk about that. I mean, live your life for yourself. Not anybody else's life but your own. You're the one who has to go to bed at night by yourself. I mean, even when you're laying next to your partner, you're